Hi, my name's Chandra. I am the content writer with Market Apartments.
Hi, I'm Danny. I'm the social media specialist and I do some of the local listings.
Yeah, so today we're going to talk a little bit about local listings, like where you want to make sure your property, your apartment complex shows up online and some of the basics as to like making sure that it's updated and good to go. One thing we've mentioned before, if you follow us, we talk a lot about making sure that all of your like listings, the hours, the website, everything is really consistent. So we're gonna go over a little bit of like different places you might want to make sure are updated, and just like what potential tenants might be looking at or looking for when they are on those sites trying to find your apartment or get directions or that sort of thing. So I guess Danny, why don't you say a little bit about like what you do as
Sure.
far as local listings goes?
Yeah, so when an apartment community comes to us, basically I get notified and then one of the first things that we do is make sure that their local listings are up to date. So we have Google, we do Yelp, we do Bing and Apple Maps, and I don't actually do Google. We're going to go over that later, but I don't actually do Google. I do Yelp, Bing, and Apple Maps. So depending on the company, the apartment community, and what their goals are, we either will help them set up a free Yelp account or they can do a branded profile. And the cool thing about the branded profile is that they can have one account and then they can have different locations that they manage underneath that. So that's what our biggest client does for the buildings that have more than 100 units. And that way they can keep track of all of them, all of the communities in the same place, and they
Mm-hmm.
can just easily go and update those. So we do that. I go ahead and I claim the listings in Bing if there is a listing already. If it's a new property that's just being built, they won't have one, so I have to go create one. And then I go and I do the same thing in Apple. Um, so I have to make sure that the name, address, and website and the phone number are all correct and they all match the property's info that they want because sometimes they change the number. So you want to make sure that that's updated too. And then, yeah, so then I go and I claim them, but then I have to go and verify them as well. So that's making sure that we tell Bing or Apple Maps that we actually can, like we have permission to manage this listing now so that they will let us change some of the information because sometimes it will just lock you out if you've just claimed it but not verified it. But we want to make sure the information is up to date. So you have to go and verify it. It's just a little extra step.
So, the verification process, what does that usually entail? I mean, as far as like, I mean, if I'm logging into something as myself, usually the verification is something that comes through on my phone,
Right.
where you have to like, oh, click a button with Google, or you
Yep.
have to like input a number they sent you via text message because you're doing some sort of second
Yes.
verification. So how does it work with properties like these?
So with the verification, what happens is I will go in and I'll claim it. And then with Bing, they actually send out a postcard. And this is why it's actually very important to make sure the address is correct because they send a postcard to the address that they have on file. And so then the postcard has a PIN number on it. And so once the property gets that, they email me that PIN number and then I can go in and put that in.
So it is
It's
like the phone, just like
yeah.
Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little more complicated. It's not. Sometimes we have issues with that where the address won't be correct. So that we can't really verify those and that's not good. In that case, we have to go and suggest an edit on Bing, like in the actual listing, because
Mhm.
we can't fix it otherwise. So yeah, so that's how it happens for Bing. For Apple, we have to get like a utility bill that has the property's name and the address clearly on there, but it has to come from like the city or something like that so that they can verify that this is actually, bless you.
Great. Okay.
So they can verify that it's actually the property and that we can actually manage the listing, that we have
Mhm.
contact with them enough that we can get a
Mhm.
utility bill.
Mhm.
So yeah, and it takes about 5 days on Apple Maps. They're kind of picky sometimes about the utility bills. So that's something we've run into in the past where they're like, yeah, we're not taking this. And I'm like, okay, I have to go get a different one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it takes about 5 days for them to verify that. And once that's verified, I can go in and I can update the information.
I mean, it's quite a process. And I guess with
Yeah.
Yelp, like you said, there's like two different ways to set it up.
Mhm.
So I mean, if you're a small, ownership or management group or something, it's pretty easy to just set up the
Oh,
free
yeah.
account.
Mhm.
Obviously, if you're a larger management company or you have a large portfolio or something, then maybe you'd want to do the branded account.
Mhm.
But it's definitely a lot to manage.
Yes.
Um, but I guess that's another reason why we wanted to talk a little bit about it was because I think a lot of times we assume that Google is number one, which it is. I mean, it is
Right.
number one, but that it's the only place that people are searching for properties or trying to find out the information. And so we forget to update all these other places. But
Yes.
I know people are looking at Yelp for specific reviews.
Right.
People end up using Bing or Apple Maps simply because of whatever is already downloaded on
Yep.
their computer or phone. So a lot of times those will just be the default. So that's what they end up using without them actually like seeking that out. And so it's just important, I think, to make sure that if you really want to be found by people and not be a source of frustration, if you don't want people to like try to find you and then just leave and give up, which of course you don't want, you got to make sure that everything's updated.
Mhm.
Uh, with something like Google, that one most of the time, if you're an established property or business, or you're taking over some sort of one that's already existed, usually there's already the business listing. So you'll already have the Google business profile set up.
Yep.
If not, that's something that can definitely be created.
Yeah.
Um, we have another member on our team who actually like claims those Google listings and works closely with the clients to get those set up. But it's not that complicated of a process to actually set that up initially. But there is a lot of information on Google that you can include, that you might want to include. And I think that's across the board. I know that Bing has a lot of similar stuff, like you can input most of the same things on Bing. Yelp as well, but it's definitely set up a little differently. Um, the biggest thing for me, from what I've seen with working with properties, especially when I've updated local listings for them, the biggest things I see are address, website, hours. Like
Yep.
those are the things that people are checking the most that you want to make sure are updated and that are consistent, because not only does that build trust with your tenants, you want to show that you have a consistent presence and that your info is accurate, but like things like Google, they take note of that. You
Yeah.
can get if you've ever searched for anything, you might get a notification that says these hours might not be correct
Yes.
on the business.
Yeah.
And if I'm looking at that as a tenant, or as a prospective tenant, I'm not going to have a lot of faith in a property. So it's really important that you're getting those things updated.
Act has actually been a problem with Apple Maps too. Like if I go to claim a listing now in Apple Maps and the hours don't match what's on the website, they're like, yeah, we're not gonna verify this. So I'm like,
Mhm.
thanks. That's
Mhm.
good to know.
Yeah.
So I
No,
have to
that's
watch for
really,
that.
yeah, it's really important. I think you do have to be a little bit detail oriented
Oh, for
with
sure.
a lot of these. It's really easy to just, have like a tiny little typo and suddenly your phone number is wrong.
Yeah.
Um, or the hours are wrong. And especially with stuff like Google, a lot of these where other people can update them, it's important to check regularly because you can get suggested edits. And if Google
Yeah.
thinks that's more accurate than what you put in last, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that wins basically, and that's
Oh,
what
for
will be
sure.
there. I've had times where I've edited a property's hours or some basic information, and it's like it will not stick. And every time I go in there, I'm
Yeah.
updating it and it's showing something else and it's not getting approved. So it is something you're going to want to check regularly. I mean, I've had similar issues updating things. I mean, maybe you've seen some like this, but with Yelp, where I tried to update the name like 6 times, and every time I went back in and it just like wasn't working. So
Mm-hmm.
you might need to, if you're going to do this yourself, there's a good chance you'll need to befriend some of the support
Yes.
staff of these
Yes.
listing places. Really, overall, it's not that complicated, but it is a lot to keep track of and on so many different platforms.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially if you've got a lot of properties.
And
Right.
then there's
Yeah.
so much info. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I was just gonna say, like with the Yelp, like when we have issues, the fact that we have like people we can go to with Yelp and be like, hey, this thing isn't correct, but it's locked me out. Can you help me with this? They're like
Yeah.
on it. They're
Yeah, that's
amazing.
great. That's great. That's
So
great. Because I know not everywhere is as good as that, but
yeah.
that's fantastic to know. Because
Hmm.
I've worked with Yelp a little bit, but I don't have to set up the accounts. So for me, it's just basic like maintenance, updating
Hmm.
things. When we've had properties that need it, or some of our larger clients get that, like,
Yeah.
want that updated regularly. So I've definitely done that, but claiming is a different process, and getting all that information in can be a lot. I've definitely had to go through each section of each of those uh, sites before, like on Bing, on Yelp, going through every page, updating all the
Yes.
information. So then
Hmm.
you're like, you're updating the address, you're making sure the PIN is in the right place. You have to update the phone number, the business type. Usually there is a type of business description. You'll see this on, I think, all of those. I mean, I don't know about Apple Maps, but Google, Bing, and Yelp all have places for like a description of the
Right.
property.
Hmm. I have to
And
put a category in it.
yeah. So there's some things like that you need to know. So for
Hmm.
instance, if you're doing Google, you want to set up your Google business profile. If it's already there and it already exists, you'll know from searching pretty much anything what it looks like when a business pops up and you see their name, and then it'll say like overview, website, the
Yeah.
different things you can click on to access their info. If you're on a desktop and you see that usually off to the right, if you just look down under some of the basic info, it'll say own this business with a question mark, and you can click that and claim an existing business or use that as a way to also log in. Sometimes you'll want to go to change things, but it's not showing you all the business tools, and it's because you're just not like logged in. So you can click that and then it'll pop up. And then generally, what that looks like is just up on the left, you've got all these little categories you can choose.
Hmm.
And I think all of these platforms are set up similarly. Google's just a little different because it's like within the
Right.
search
Yeah.
frame. But for all of these, you end up with different pages or different categories that you can update the information for.
Yep.
So, and if this is interesting or you want more help or something like that, obviously leave it in the comments because we can do a bit of more of a deep dive with a lot more visuals. Today, we just
Yeah.
kind of wanted to do an overview because not everyone thinks of all of these places or knows
Yes.
exactly what to update. It can be hard to know where to start. So anyway,
Hmm.
let us know if that's something you want a little bit more info on or you need help with. But with Google, everything will kind of show up right at the top of the page, and anything you click on brings up a little pop-up, and you can edit every single section. Like we've already mentioned, the biggest ones are going to be your basic contact info and making sure your hours are correct. Those are huge.
Yep.
And if you want to show up and gain like trust with Google, you've got to make sure your stuff is accurate and that it shows up the same everywhere you show up, basically on the web.
Hmm.
But it gives you a chance to edit your profile. You can edit your business description. People might read that, which is nice. It's good if
Yeah.
you can do that. It also helps tell Google what you're about, which is important too. So there's a section that says edit products. A lot of times we'll add, you could add floor plans under products. You could add some amenities if you wanted to show pictures of those specifically. There's a section on services. You can include amenities under there as well, because it actually lets you like type them in and edit them. Most of the other like profile things you can edit are either a like yes or no on off type thing. So if there's anything you want to add or be specific about, those are the two sections that you can actually edit. A big part of Google is also the category. You want to make sure you're listed in the right category. There are several for apartments. So it could say apartment complex, apartment rental agency, apartment building. You can select more than one. So set one as your primary. Maybe you can take a look around, see, what some of your competitors or other local places are listed as so that you show up kind of with them and list that as your primary. But the other ones you can list as well. So no matter what ends up being searched for, you can show up. Google has a great place for like messages if you want to turn that on. It's an option. There's Q&A, so you can make sure you're answering questions that people might have about the property. There are a lot of features on Google. I would say that apart from that profile information that we already talked about, the most important ones are going to be the photos and reviews. And photos primarily because on Google, you can't delete any of the photos other people submit. So it's something you're going to want to monitor and check because, you know, sometimes people will post things in your neighborhood or from your complex that maybe you don't want on there. They're not an accurate representation of the property. So making sure that you're updating and adding photos so that what shows up as most recent, you know, is it's good content, you know. I mean, we don't want to manipulate it. This is like supposed to be an accurate representation of your property, but you want it to show your best features too. This is your business profile. So you want to do that. It gives you a chance to update a cover photo, a logo. It's really good. And pretty much everyone looks at Google reviews. So that is something you're going to want to stay on top of. You should be able to turn it on so you get notified whenever you get a Google review, and then you can go in and respond to that best as soon as possible, basically, and make sure that you're really on top of it and responding to those reviews because they stay on there too. You can't just, you know, delete whatever you like. They're there. And so you want to make sure that you're responding. And again, if that's something else you'd like to go into or how we handle reputation management, reviews, things like that, feel free to like leave any questions in the comments and we can address it. But otherwise, that's kind of the basics of Google. Generally, it'll even tell you kind of your profile strengths. You can kind of see if you've got everything filled out. But
Nice.
I know that sounds like a lot, so we might be overwhelming people. I don't know, it might overwhelm you a little if it's just covering it like this, but hopefully this gives you an idea of what's all entailed. And then if you want us, like I said, to do a deep dive into any one thing specifically, we can go a little deeper. I've already talked a lot about Google, so we can definitely do that. Like I said, I have done a little bit with Bing and Yelp, not Apple Maps though. And since Danny does all of those all the time, basically, we'll let Danny talk a little bit more about the process with those. And any other information that you might need to include there that doesn't quite match up with Google, things that might be a little different.
So yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna actually start out with Yelp because it is the easiest one, quite frankly. We actually, so when we're doing the branded profiles, we actually have a spreadsheet because we have our Yelp representatives who help us out with this because we have the branded profiles. So we have a spreadsheet. We just go put the information in the spreadsheet. So generally it's like the stuff we've talked about, name, address, not the hours, phone number, website, and then like a call to action button because you always want to have that on Yelp.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just let them know that we put stuff in the spreadsheet and then they go and create that for us. The cool thing is that if there was a Yelp listing for that property before, the older one is going to get marked as closed and it's going to just start falling in the rankings. So when you go to Google and you look it up and then Yelp comes up, like that listing specifically is just going to start falling.
Mm-hmm.
And then the new one's going to get bumped up because it's the one that's actually being used and being updated.
Uh-huh.
So, and then if they're doing like a free Yelp listing, it's very easy to set up, like super easy. You just go in, put in the information. We have a guide that goes through all of this too. We can send. But basically it's just super easy. You just put in the information, verify that it's you. They'll call you with a number and then you just put that in there and it's good to go. So then with Bing, you go in, you put in the name and the name and the address, and then you have it searched to see if there's already a listing. If there's not already a listing, you just go ahead and create a new one. You just put in the same information. If you have a store code, you would put that in Bing. That way it's easier to look up that way. Because sometimes their system is a little weird.
It's true.
We've had issues where we can't find a property or like one of the coworkers can't find a property, but then someone else will go look and they'll find it just from a different, like from the zip code even.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Especially if like someone spelled it incorrectly when they put something in and then you're trying to
Yes.
find it. Sometimes you can't find it then. So like
Mhm.
it is also really important to be accurate and like double
Yeah.
check your work when you're putting stuff in.
Mhm.
But it does help. Yeah. If you've got store code, zip code, there are other ways of searching on Bing that will
Yeah.
bring it up. You can find it, but can be a little tricky.
Yeah. So then you also want to mark that it's a business. You want to make sure that's marked in Bing. And then you want to make sure that the PIN is correct also. You can go change that later if you need to. And then
On the
make sure
map.
that, yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah.
it's okay. I just want to make sure that everybody knows exactly what you're what you're talking about. The
Yeah.
little pin on the map that shows exactly where your address is.
Yeah. That's actually a
Yeah.
common problem that we have with Apple Maps. Like a lot of our clients will be like, the pin is not in the correct place. It's not over the building that people need to come into. And so we have to go correct that a lot. But sometimes we can't actually correct that in the Business Connect side because sometimes that information doesn't actually pull over into Apple Maps. So then we have to contact support about that. But yeah, it can be fixed. But yeah, so then with Bing, you just put in the email address and that's basically all the information that you need in order to claim it, not to verify it, because you have to get the postcard and then put the pin in. And then you can go change whatever information that they locked before. And then for Apple Maps, you go in and you put you can put the name in and it'll pop up similar listings with that name. And then you like click on the correct address. If it's not there, you just go ahead and create a new one. You just put in the information it'll ask for. It's very simple, very easy. You want to make sure that the hours are correct though, because it might not let you claim it if the hours don't match what's on the website. Same thing with phone number. They're very picky about the phone number. And then if it's just like one location underneath a business, so if it's like a property management company that has different apartments, you just
Mhm.
want to add it as a location underneath the main company, and that will be the business. That's one of the things that we had to figure out the hard way. So it was weird because Apple just they changed the platform last year, like the beginning of last
Mm,
year.
mhm.
It was weird, but we got it figured out, so that was good.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like
So
there's a lot to keep track of. And I mean, just like you said, Apple changing everything
mm,
last year, Google's constantly updating. I
yeah,
mean, most of these platforms do update pretty regularly, which means things can change. So you do need to not only be updating it regularly so the information is as accurate as possible, but so that you can stay familiar with the platform because then you don't have to contact support as much, you
right.
know?
Yes,
There's a lot.
exactly.
There's 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 kind of a lot to keep track of with that. And um I don't know. I know we've addressed already that part of the reason you want to make sure these are updated is because you don't know where your prospects are searching from. So you don't know how
Mhm.
they're finding you. But like I said, it's also letting these search engines, these tools know that you are active and a
Yeah,
legitimate business.
yes,
And so like you might think, oh, well, our hours haven't changed in 5 years. Why would I have to go update that or check on that?
right.
If you're not actively looking at it, they also recognize that. So like you said with Yelp, you update one and that's supposed to be active and the other one is closed. But if you're not updating your new one, it's not going to stay much ahead either. Like you've got to show that
Hmm.
you're being active. Am I on the
Yeah.
right track with
Oh yeah,
that?
for sure. Another thing with Yelp that we ought to mention is that sometimes Apple Maps will pull from Yelp. So you want to make sure your Yelp information is definitely correct.
That's very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. We found that out the hard way too. We had one issue on Apple Maps that we were trying to correct. It took us a while to figure out it's because it was pulling it from Yelp and the Yelp was incorrect. So we had to go fix that and then
Mhm.
fix the other one.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Crazy. It sounds like I think it's interesting the way a lot of these different sites ends up working together,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you might be using one platform or one type of like search engine, but if you're looking for something on Yelp, on any other, there's just a lot of crossover there. So just making sure that wherever you show up, it's correct
Yes. Yep.
is a good idea.
You
Uh,
absolutely. Oh, another thing we run into with people, like when clients don't update regularly, is sometimes the property gets marked permanently closed
mm,
on Apple Maps specifically. So if that happens, then we have to contact support about it and be like, yeah, they're actually open. So that's another reason you want to be updating.
yeah. I think one thing to remember, just as an aside, is that with a lot of uh, these different search engines, websites, they're prioritizing active, current content across the board. So like it's whatever you're writing, if you have blogs, if you have website content, like everything, it's all about being current and up to date because they want the most up to date information, the one with the most authority.
Yeah.
You know, they're not showing businesses that haven't been touched in a really long time.
Yeah.
You know, they're not showing articles that are from a really long time ago on the very first page, unless it's super specific. So if you want to be able to be found in search results, you need to make sure that it's updated or other things will come up ahead of you. We've talked a little bit before about specifically with Google and making sure like your Google, like that you can rank well on Google Maps,
Right.
but a lot of that comes from your Google business profile.
Yep.
So if you don't have this up to date, if it's not current, if you're not active on it, you're not going to rank on Google Maps. So if someone is searching in a certain area, they're not going to be able to find you.
Right.
At least not quickly because you're not going to show up in the
Right.
list. The list is the first place people go, you know?
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
well, if Google thinks these are the best, they're the best, you
Right.
know?
Especially in
Or
the
the ones with
first
the
thing.
highest. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just something else to be aware of with these local listings. And I don't know how many of you watching this have done these before or worried about it before. I know a lot of the clients that we've worked with usually have at least a Google, unless it is a
Yeah.
brand new property.
Right.
A lot of them usually have at least Google because we know that everyone goes to Google. Majority of people are using Google.
Yeah.
So it is really important. But like you said, if Apple Maps is pulling from Yelp, plus Apple Maps has its own like platform, and then Bing is like a whole other search
Yeah.
engine that like a great number of people are using. It's just important that the same principles kind of apply, that you get it done and that you make sure you're showing up there too. It's gonna help you get leads. It's gonna help you get leases. You want to increase your occupancy, you've got to show up online. And this is a big part of how you're gonna do that.
For sure. And the more places you show up, the better too, because I don't remember how many touch points is it before someone will actually click.
Oh, I've heard a few things. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's 7 is the average. Sometimes I've heard 13.
Yeah. So you want to make sure that
So,
you're showing up in different places too, so that they can get that brand recognition going, so that they'll
right.
actually start like
Mhm.
clicking through.
Right. So for anyone who didn't quite get that, because maybe we're just talking like marketing speak, but generally, say you're shopping online, it's not usually the first time you see a business or a brand that you're going to automatically buy the thing they're
Right.
selling.
Yeah.
The idea is that usually you have to see that or hear about it a number of times. Like I said, I've heard a
Right.
couple of different averages recently, but if it's 7 times, if it's 13 times, you know, you want to make sure you're showing up everywhere to give you as much of a chance as possible.
Right.
You know, I'm sure that you take the time to make sure you're listed on listing sites, you know,
Right.
people
Yeah.
always looking on rent.com, apartments.com, Zillow, you know, you make sure that you're everywhere that you think people might be looking, but don't neglect the local listings because
For sure.
that information ends up in other places also because
Right.
other things will pull from that info because they think that's got to be the most accurate because it's coming straight from the business. And especially with something like Google, where other people can suggest edits, if you're not staying on top of it, then it's not coming directly from the business and you will lose people's trust pretty quickly. So that is something definitely to keep in mind.
For sure.
Well, I know we've covered a lot with Google, Bing, Apple Maps, Yelp, and honestly, I'm sure there are more places that you show up and should make sure that your info is updated, but those are the big ones. If you are curious about it or confused or you want to work more with that, this is what we do all the time. It's part of our jobs. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments or go ahead and reach out. You know, we'd love to help you out, work with you. Just, you know, let us know what you need or what you're looking for, and we'll see if we can answer your questions and give you a little bit of help getting set up with your local listings. For now though, if this is the kind of thing you like, or you're interested in apartment marketing and you want to learn a little bit more, go ahead and like this video or subscribe. And you can hit the bell to get notified and follow along with us as, you know, we share a little bit more about what it's like to be apartment marketers. And yeah, I guess we'll see you later.